Attention football fans, we have action this week. That's right, folks. In just 5 days, the UFL kicks off their 2026 season, which means we got to finish our UFL team previews, and we've got the last and final team in the chute. It's one of the new teams, the Orlando Storm. Team preview starts now. Welcome, football fans, to another edition of the D-Gen Docs. What is up, folks? Last team preview. Can't wait. 8 out of 8. We've gone through the gauntlet. Season is this week, right around the corner. We've got so much to be excited about. What is up, folks? I'm your host, the D-Gen Doc, and it's another team preview. And as you can see, recording this late into the Sunday wee hours. Got the nice Gators light. Oh, there it is. Gators light. So hopefully if you got some maybe potential Orlando fans, Florida residents, big Gators game tomorrow. But let's go ahead and just jump right in. This is the UFL Team Preview Series, the last final edition, the Orlando Storm edition. If this is your first time joining us, cheers, welcome, thanks for coming, hanging out. Hopefully you're getting jacked up about this new, not really new football league, but a new season with a lot of new teams, new ownerships, new rules, new this, new that. It almost feels like a new league. It's a nice, fresh rebranding to get us excited here. Way this is going to work is, hey, so if you're brand new to the UFL, don't know even like what it is, United Football League, right? What's that stand for? I did an episode on everything you need to know about the 2026 UFL. What's, again, new ownership, there's new teams, location, all these different things. Check that out. There's also rules, right? We had an update in the playing rules, 2026 playing rules. No tush push. No punting across the 50-yard line. 4-point field goals. There's a lot you got to know, so I did an episode on that. And then finally, we've done the defending champion DC Defenders. We've done the Dallas Renegades, St. Louis Battlehawks, the Birmingham Stallions, the Houston Gamblers, the Columbus Aviators, the Louisville Kings, and finally the 8th and final team, the Orlando Storm, are coming to town. And that is what this episode is all about. So without further ado, let's just jump right into it. The Orlando Storm coming to a city near you, assuming you're located next to Orlando. Actually, was just in Orlando today, and it's a nice little passerby coming back from vacation. Probably see him come back a little bit tanner. Spent some time in the Caribbean, which is why, a little bit late on this episode. But hey, we're getting it out there. We're getting it done. But Orlando, which if you've been in Orlando, anywhere in Florida really, a storm could come at just about any second. But don't worry, it won't be there very long. Usually 25 minutes of the worst storm of your life, and then you're passing on into green, beautiful pastures there. But this is the Orlando Storm. They are one of the newer teams. They got rid of 3 teams in the league that just weren't producing, whether it's fan-wise, the venues weren't working out, and Orlando is one of these new teams here, and they will be playing their ball at one of the prettiest stadiums that we have to offer here. Now, it's going to be at Inter & Co. Stadium, where Orlando soccer team currently plays. Orlando City, I believe they're called. One of the big things of the UFL, new owner, one of the new owners, Mike Rapoli, came in. He's kind of the one running the day-to-day, figuring some stuff out. Big things, they're trying to drive fan engagement. They just announced a bunch of halftime shows, which I'll be talking about in my next episode. I'm going to do a final season recap. I'll talk about those halftime shows. They got, DJ Khaled is the guy performing for Orlando. They've got Wale. They've got Gucci Mane. They've got a couple country guys. They've, each place at halftime for week 1, they are trying to do everything they can to drive fan engagement, because a lot of times what's happening is you'd have these big stadiums that were only partially full, not even half full, and it just would be bad optics. The vibes would be off. There was not a lot of home field advantage. So they're trying to go to smaller, intimate, more soccer stadium type venues, and this follows suit here in Orlando with this Inter & Co. Stadium. Very, very, that purple that they're going into there. This is obviously for one of the soccer matches where the fans are out, but look at this. I mean, look at that backdrop on the city. You know, the purples kind of flow in. I'm sure if you play some games where you can get a little bit of a sunset, some Florida sunsets, you get a little bit of those, orange and purple vibes there. So I really, really like this venue, and I think hopefully Orlando and, the people of Orlando are just as excited to go out there and start having a great time in the stadium. So yeah, Orlando Storm with the venue there. So typically, most of the episodes I would do, this would be the segment I'd go into. What did this team look like last year? 2025 recap. What was their coaching staff? What was their stats looking like? How was this team structured? What can we... Because you can kind of take a little bit of what, obviously, like any team breakdown. What did they do last year? What were the changes? And what do we expect this year? This team didn't exist last year. So, obviously, with the 3 expansion teams kind of skipping right into... we're actually going to go to a uniform check segment here. Let's go ahead and see what these uniforms are rocking. Obviously, these are your colors. You got your orange, your purple, your white, and your black there. So could go a lot of different ways. Now, I'm curious to hear what y'all think about these uniforms. Personally, I think it was pretty well done. I think you definitely could have went bolder, maybe tried some more of that orange uniforms, maybe there even a purple uniform if you really, really want to get crazy. But they went with more of the kind of classy, like let's start with a black or a white base and then kind of fill in there. But I like the white and the purple. I think that does look clean. The black and the orange, you get a little bit of the Halloween effect, but hey, those are the colors. So this is the 2026 Orlando Storm uniform check there. Obviously, the Noble and the Fanatics there is what they're going with the new era. So, but uniforms, I think overall pretty solid. I was pretty impressed by the uniforms this year when they did the uniform reveal for all the teams. But curious what your thoughts are. Did you think Orlando hit this uniform? You think they could have done better? I mean, it's kind of some funky colors, so you could have gone a lot of different ways. Went a little bit more tame there, but I do not mind it in my opinion. Now, getting over to the betting streets. Of course, this is we're on DFSG Plus Sports Betting channel. So we are going to talk sports betting a ton this year. These are more of the team previews, so more of just kind of setting the lay of the land to see, hey, are we going to bet this team or not this year? But we are going to talk their 2026 UFL Championship odds as we've done every single team. Now, this is kind of a middle-of-the-pack team, so there's some variability in the betting markets, though. There's only 3 books that at least I have access to that have numbers hung right now. DraftKings and Bet365 both have Orlando Storm to win the UFL Championship at plus 550, and then ScoreBet is plus 750. So obviously, if you decide you want to back this team, head on over to ScoreBet and get that plus 750. Now, playoff format I have to discuss because it has changed this year. In the past, they used to have, hey, there was the USFL, there was the XFL, 2 leagues, spring leagues kind of competing, but just kind of doing their own thing. They realized, hey, if we want this to be sustainable and successful, we got to merge, make the UFL happen a couple years ago. So there used to be a USFL division and an XFL division, and there would be 4 teams in each conference, Conferences were what they were, but they used to be, those 2 different conferences, and then they would have, all right, so top 2 teams in the conference division, whatever it was, they would go to the playoffs, they'd play each other, and then they would face off for the championship, the winners of each division, conference, whatever it may be. This year, getting rid of those divisions. No more divisions. It is just going to be the top 4 teams of the league go to the playoffs. So in the past, you would think like, hey, if I got 4 teams in a stacked division here, got to be careful because only 2 are going to make it to the playoffs, where you could maybe get some long shots knowing, hey, 2 of those teams from the other side of the bracket have to get in. Now it is just simply the top 4 teams. So that is a noteworthy change in how the playoffs are going to work for this season. Okay, let's continue on here. We are going to talk, for the rest of the episode, we're going to talk coaching staff, we're going to talk quarterback room, we're going to talk about key players on this roster, and then we are going to finish up with my outlook. What do I see this team looking like for the 2026 season there? Okay, coaching staff. This is a pretty fun one here as far as coaching staffs can go, but the head man in charge, a guy who, if you've watched spring football, you are very familiar with. And if you've watched Iowa State and are a Penn State fan, you're probably familiar with the last name, or you're an old Jets fan, or whatever it may be. But guy in charge, the head honcho, El Jefe there in Orlando, head coach Anthony Becht. Yes, this is the same Anthony Beck that was the former NFL first-round pick as a tight end, played at West Virginia, was inducted into the West Virginia Hall of Fame. Now, as a pick guy myself, a little bit of a pick guy, more of a Florida guy, but did get my doctorate from Pitt. What really does a West Virginia Hall of Fame? Does that really carry any weight? About as much weight as some Charmin tissue paper. But, hey, that's neither here nor there. But he did have a 11-year NFL career. He had a 152 consecutive game streak, which was third longest NFL streak during his time there. So Anthony Beck lived it, breathed it, tight end, first-round draft pick, 11 years in the NFL, was a very solid player. So he is no slouch to the game. He knows a lot about it. He went on from there to work as a college football analyst after his playing career and hosted a Jets pregame show. But he became a first-time head coach in 2023 in St. Louis. Now, if you've watched the UFL, XFL is where he kind of got to start with the St. Louis Battlehawks. He has produced 3 winning seasons as a head coach. He's at 22-8 as his overall record. I think that's only second best to Skip Holtz during that time period. Back-to-back playoff appearances there. He has won and gotten those teams consistently to the playoffs year after year after year. Now, my question is, what I'm curious is, was this more of a volunteer or voluntold position? Because Anthony Beck really kind of he really embraced the St. Louis culture. I mean, St. Louis, the Battlehawks, by far the best fan base as far as showing out. They were packing a massive, massive stadium there in St. Louis. They're doing a great job in that Battle Dome, really creating probably the best, not even probably, the best home field advantage within the UFL, at least to this point. And was very surprised to see him leave. So I don't know if this was one of those where, the ownership was like, hey, you're a Florida resident, we need to start up a team. Maybe he saw it as a cool opportunity, or maybe it was a little bit of a voluntold. They wanted to get Ricky Pearl over there in St. Louis as they're really trying to buy into these hometown ties. A.J. McCarron in Birmingham, Ted Ginn Jr. in Columbus. So I'm very curious if it was more of a voluntold. But that is Mr. Anthony Beck's story there. So coming in with some, very valid and recent spring football UFL experience as a head coach, as a winning head coach there, which you can't say that about a lot of these coaching staffs. Now for the offensive coordinator position, this was a little bit of a late shakeup. They were expecting the offensive coordinator to be Kyle Kaskey, but he was hired by the Minnesota Vikings on February 19th. He was the running back and special teams coach for St. Louis for the past 2 years. He had 18 years of college and NFL coaching experience. Would have been a first-time play caller, but he was on the staff with Anthony Beck last year, the past 2 years in St. Louis, so there was some continuity there. But he got hired by Minnesota Vikings, going to take the NFL job, of course. So you've got 2 co-coordinators, 2 co-OCs, Mark Colombo and Colin Thompson, and there's still some debate about who's going to be calling plays. Potentially Anthony Beck may be calling plays, which if that's the case, kind of expect a run-heavy dose there as a former tight end guy who put his hand in the dirt. But so still a little bit of some questions on the offensive side. Had a plan for a guy to be an OC. He gets a better job. Now we're kind of scrambling a little bit. We saw last year scrambling on the coaching side worked out very well for the DC Defenders, but is that a recipe for success? We'll see. On the defensive side, this is where we get some stability. Donnie Abrams, he was defense coordinator for the St. Louis Battlehawks for the past 3 seasons, and last year he led the #1 scoring defense in the league with the St. Louis Battlehawks. He was a former NFL DB, and he has college and spring football, obviously, coaching experience. So he's a guy who's like Beck. He's been with Beck for the past few years, and that defense, #1 in the league last year as far as in terms of scoring defense. So he obviously knows how to coach these guys up. Now, he did have a very elite pass rush for St. Louis that doesn't look like he's going to get that same level, but he does have some playmakers there and some guys that he's familiar with coming over from St. Louis. Now, talking about everyone's favorite room, the quarterback room. Now, this is one where we've got a bunch of guys who have actually never played a spring football, which, there's kind of a mixed bag. It's either you're going to get a lot of the same guys that you've seen over and over again, your Jordan Ta'amus, your Louis Perez's, guys like that, Jalen McClendon, guys of that nature. And then you got some guys who were, maybe they were former NFL guys. They were all obviously, big in college and stepping over to continue their career, continue their professional football career over on the swing football side of the house. Now, the biggest name and the guy who is likely going to make quarterback one, at least to start off the year, and that is Mr. Dorian Thompson Robinson. He will be referred to as DTR for the show because that is way easier to say. But he was a former fifth-round pick for the Cleveland Browns. Did not work out in Cleveland, which many quarterbacks, things do not work out in Cleveland. But in the NFL, he was only a 52.6 completion percentage, 880 pass yards, 1 touchdown to 10 interceptions, and 35 rushes for 187 yards in the NFL. So not great by any stretch of the imagination, but he was a 5-year starting quarterback for UCLA with over 10,690 pass yards, 88 pass touchdowns, 1,800 rush yards, and 28 touchdowns. So very much the definition of a dual threat guy. Obviously struggled a bit up in college, up in the NFL with the Cleveland Browns. Again, a lot of quarterbacks do. Is that situation? Is that him? Maybe probably a little bit of both, but did not work out there for the NFL, but was a very proven quality winner, dual threat quarterback throughout his college career. Now, in the QB2 position, likely one of the backup positions, Jack Plummer. He was an NFL practice squad and QB3 guy past couple years. He was a 5-year college quarterback, played 3 years at Purdue, 1 at Cal, 1 at Louisville. He had 9,700 pass yards, 68 pass touchdowns, minus 18 rush yards, and 3 rush touchdowns. So, another guy who had a long college career, had a lot of success, definitely at least in the stat department, but he does not bring that rushing element, negative 18 yards. Now in college, sacks count against rush yards, so you're going to see some of that if a guy's not super mobile, and only 3 touchdowns. It just does say, hey, definitely more of your traditional pocket passer here with Plummer. And then Hank Bachmeier, who's also he had a long college career, a 6-year collegiate quarterback, last played in 2024, 4 years at Boise State, 1 with La Tech and 1 with Wake Forest. He had 11,256 pass yards in his career, 67 pass touchdowns, 195 rush yards, and 6 rush touchdowns. So even longer career than DTR and Plummer, a guy who has been able to produce consistently, not quite obviously the runner that DTR is, but he does have a little bit of wiggle room there, but mostly a pocket passer there. So DTR is right now, based on the promo, based on everything we're reading, he is the leader in the clubhouse. I do fully expect him to get the start, and I fully expect them to run their offense kind of around him, and if they're wise, they'll utilize his legs, because especially early on in the UFL, those dual threat quarterbacks really create some stress on the defense, and when these guys are only getting, 4 weeks, maybe 4 or 5 weeks to go through training camp and learn the plays and get together, and guys are getting signed and not signed and things like that, you got to be able to create your own play at the quarterback position in the UFL. Now, moving over to the key players on this Orlando Storm roster here. Let's start with, if you've watched any of my shows or any of the stuff I've been doing over the past couple of years, I am a firm believer that everything starts up front in the trenches. As a Giants fan, when we had great offensive lines, as I'm sure your teams have, your teams excel. And when you put the offensive line on the back burner and you let things kind of go to shit, you can't do anything without the base. It all starts up front with the hog mollies. So I'm going to highlight guard Cole Schneider, a guy who's been in a long time Birmingham Stallion, and he's a versatile interior offensive lineman. He can play multiple positions, and he was a key cog in those multiple championship teams that Birmingham had. They won back in 22, 23, 24, did not win last year, but they were consistently the best team throughout the league, and he was a big part of those runs. So I think that is a nice get up front at the guard position. Then you bring back the leading rusher in the UFL as in running back Jay-Sean Corbin there. He went for 514 rush yards, 4 touchdowns, 138 receiving yards, and 252 kick return yards last season. So led the league in rush yards. He is a dynamic runner. He can definitely break one. That's why they put him back there on the kick return. He's an effective returner there. And then out of the backfield, he can scoot a little bit. So he's a very do-it-all guy for Orlando, a big focal point of this offense. Now, another guy who comes over and had a ton of success in the UFL last season, wide receiver Chris Rowland. He was the wide receiver 1 for the defending champion DC Defenders last year. He was an all UFL returner back in 2024. He had 125 rush yards, 72 receptions, 871 receiving yards, and 7 total touchdowns there. That is in his career. It should be both 24 and 25, but he was a very, very big part of that DC Defenders offense. Jordan Tayamu and him had a great connection there. And he returns both kicks and punts. So he is really, between him and Corbin, those are your two mainstays in the offense. Now, a couple other guys I wanted to highlight was some wide receivers that are looking to get a fresh start, but we've seen them produce consistently at the college level. First up, wide receiver KJ Hamler, former Penn State star wide receiver, and he was a second-round draft pick by the Denver Broncos not too long ago. Obviously, there is talent there to go in the second round of the NFL draft, to have a great college career. So hopefully he can create some of that magic in the UFL. Also, guys like Elijah Badger, who went to Arizona State but then transferred to Florida, not last season but the season before, and he had a great year with DJ Lagway before DJ Lagway kind of, turned into a pumpkin a little bit. And then Cam Camper, who, if you're a Boise State or an Indiana fan over the past couple of years, you are definitely familiar with. Camper was on that team that went to the playoff with Ashton Jeanty. So he was one of the key wide receivers there for Boise State. So you got guys that were big production in college, and can they turn that into production in the UFL? And I told you I was going to talk about kicker for every single team because you got the 4-point field goal. You also are bringing back the extra points where you can, from an NFL extra point distance, you can get the 1 point. So kicking is becoming increasingly important. Michael Lance is the kicker for the Orlando Storm, projected 5-year college kicker, 2 years at Minnesota, 2 years at Georgia Southern, and 1 year at USC. He only had a 72.6 percentage of conversion. He had 62 attempts with 45 makes, and he had a long of 54. So not the most accurate guy, at least when he was in college, but he's got a decently big leg there with the 54-yard long field goal. Now moving over to the defensive side, you've got up front defensive tackle Isaiah Mack coming over from the St. Louis Battlehawks. He had 12 tackles, 1 TFL, 2 sacks, and a forced fumble last season with St. Louis. He's got the familiarity with both Anthony Beck, head coach Anthony Beck, and defensive coordinator Donnie Abrams. So look for him to be a key clog up there in the middle. And then linebacker Tavante Beckett, he was the defensive leader for the San Antonio Brahms for the past 2 seasons. Guy's an absolute tackling machine. He had 154 tackles, 14 TFLs, 2.5 sacks, 5 pass deflections, and 3 forced fumbles just in the past 2 seasons. That, not so much last season, but in 2024 season, when they went to the UFL Championship, that San Antonio Brahmas defense was legit, and Beckett was a big part of that in the middle. Also going to highlight 2 cornerbacks here, some guys who have been starters, some mainstays in the league. Cornerback Mark Gilbert, who was with Birmingham in 2024 and then with Memphis last year. He's had 48 tackles, 1 TFL, 1 interception, 1 forced fumble, and 10 pass deflections in 2 seasons. So just a guy who's played at this level and been a starting caliber cornerback. And then the guy who's likely going to be opposite him is going to be Brandon Sebastian, coming over from the St. Louis Battlehawks, where he was a starter for 2 years. Now, he did deal with some injuries over there, but he has 21 tackles, 1 TFL, 2 interceptions, and 7 pass deflections in just 10 games over the past 2 years. He has dealt with some injuries, so he played 7 1 year and then 3 games just last year. So, but he again has shown that he can be a quality starting cornerback in the UFL. So you've got some guys who have started at this position, have gone up against, similar competition, should be able to hold their own there in the secondary. And then last piece on the defense, safety Nate Meters there, who had 49 tackles, 1 TFL, 1 sack, and 3 pass breakups for the St. Louis Battlehawks last year. So, 3 out of these four or 5 guys that I'm highlighting come over from St. Louis. And they have that continuity with the coaching staff. I think that's going to allow them to really perform at high levels again for this defense. Now, let's talk, typically I would do a key loss. Orlando actually was pretty good in a sense of, in the guys that they drafted, 93% of them showed up to camp, which you can draft guys, and whether they're trying to go to the NFL or not going to play in spring football, whatever, it's not always a guarantee those guys show up to camp. We've seen teams with as low as like 75, 73% of those guys come in. Now, at one point, Jashaun Corbin was released, but thankfully they brought him back, because I don't know why you would release the number 1 rusher from the league last year, but hey, he is with the team, so no harm, no foul there. Now, moving over to my outlook for this Orlando Storm team for the 2026 season. I think we've got some question marks here as far as, can Anthony Beck continue his success, his UFL coaching success? I think there's good news with the offensive coordinator. Is a little bit of an unexpected speed bump there, getting hired to the NFL. Thought they would have him to be able to kind of sure things up there. But you bring over, he's got the experience with the Battlehawks. Then you bring over Donnie Abrams to have that continuity. I think that is going to help with a new franchise down there. And then QB1, Dorian Thompson-Robinson. Are we going to see that magic we saw at UCLA, where he's, using his legs, using his arms, really performing at a high level? Or are we going to see some of those Cleveland Brown nightmares? 1 touchdown to 10 interceptions. That's a little bit jarring. Again, a lot of that has to do with the supporting pieces and the Browns and the dysfunction within that, but did not, his last shot at professional football did not shine there. And then, can the defense hold up without any stars or game records? I think they have a lot of good pieces, a lot of solid players, but, a lot of these other teams have 1 or 2 guys that raise right to the top and are like, these guys are just game wreckers. I don't really see that for this Orlando Storm defense. So, how is that going to work? It's going to rely on a lot of the coaching as well. And Donnie Abrams is one of the better defense coordinators in the league. All right, so for my outlook for this team, I actually think there's some decent value on this team. I think that this team is going to be a playoff team, and I believe in Coach Anthony Beck is what it comes down to. I think that when Skip Holtz was in the league, he was clearly the best head coach, and he consistently had success year after year after year. And with him gone, I think Anthony Beck is one of the better coaches. 22-8 record, and I think he's been able to win in different ways. When he had AJ McCarron on his team, he ran a certain style of offense where you're tailoring it to a drop-back quarterback, a guy who's not very mobile. And then last season, you go to guys like Manny Wilkins and Max Duggan. Those guys could not hit the wide side of a barn, as they say. The passing game was very limited. So they got creative. They used the quarterback run game. They mixed things up. They used a lot of misdirection. They figured it out and still won ball games. So I am going to, put my faith in Coach Beck there, that he can figure out the best way to utilize DTR and that, dual threat ability, because he just did it with, Max Duggan and Manny Wilkins the year prior. Now, I also trust defensive coordinator Donnie Abrams to field a competent unit. Like I was talking about, this defense does have pieces that are talented. They don't really have those superstars, but you don't have to have quote-unquote all-stars at all the positions in order to have a good defense. I think you get that continuity with both Beck and Abram. You get a lot of those St. Louis players that are playing together again. I think that's going to be beneficial for them as opposed to just really starting from scratch. I think there is some value on this team. I think they are a bit underrated in the markets right now. I think that, again, I'm just going to kind of trust Coach Beck to be able to right the ship here and get things done in Orlando. Not really getting the disrespect. They're kind of a lower half team. I get it because they're a new franchise, but the coaching staff is not new to each other, and I think they've shown that they can succeed in this league. All right, folks, as far as, hey, that is your 2026 Orlando Storm team preview. Now, for what's next, it's what's in a couple of days, baby. We are right around the corner. So we just wrapped up the UFL team preview series. All 8 teams in-depth preview have been conducted, have been done. I'm going to release likely tomorrow a final season betting preview, just a season preview as far as, hey, let's take one last look. It's going to have my power rankings on there. It's going to have quick blurbs as far as like what I think each team is going to be. It's going to talk about what bets I've already made in the futures market as far as, where is some value for these teams. And we're just going to get jacked up for the season because every week from here on out, including this week, I'm going to do what I've been doing the past couple of years. It's going to be a show breaking down all 4 of the matchups. And, we're going to talk, I'm going to talk, spreads, money lines, over under. I will talk about my best bets and what I'm placing for there and what I would advise you to place. Now, props is always a bit of a question mark, right? In the 2024 season, it was more the projection lines, fantasy projections, underdog price picks, stuff like that. Last year, they brought over the props to the sports books, mostly at ESPN Bet, which is now Score Bet, kind of, sort of. But we'll see. A lot of times last year, those numbers and those props would not drop until like Friday, like day of the game or like very late. So if that's the case, what I did last year was I would do the video on the breakdown as far as breaking down the teams, breaking down the game, and then picking against the spread and over-unders and best bets in that way. And then I would just tweet out what my props were for the week because I will be playing them as long as they offer them. But if they hopefully, if they can improve to the point that they can get these things out on Wednesday or Thursday consistently, then I will include it in my recording as far as what the player props will be and why I'm picking that, and I'll go into all that. So hopefully that can be included this year, but absolutely, definitely every week you're going to get a game breakdown of every game and what side I am taking. I'll tell you right now, I've already bet week 1. I'm very, very excited. I think there's a lot of value in week 1 based on kind of where I have these teams racked and stacked. But we will get into all of that in just a few days because we are just a few days from real football kicking off. So I hope you are just as jacked up as I am. We can stop pretending about this baseball or basketball, as although I enjoy March Madness, especially when your team in the Florida Gators are defending national champions. But we can stop pretending that baseball, soccer, all that other crap matters because it's all about football here on the DFSG channel. But hey, folks, you know what they say. A lock a day keeps the bookie away. And here at the DGen Docs, we've got your prescription. From Doc here on DFSG Plus, I'm out of here.